For all my life, I've had this thing which I've now discovered is called waiting mode. And what that means is if I have an appointment, just even if it's just a little thing, even if I'm just waiting for the postman to deliver something, I cannot focus on anything else until that thing has been carried out. This can be a real tiny thing or it can be a big thing, like something that's actually weeks and weeks, even months ahead, can completely take over my whole life. And I had no idea why this happened to me, and I thought that it wasn't that unusual, that it probably other people were the same. Then I realised that they actually weren't the same, and after I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, I found there's quite a few reasons why this happens to me. And it's not pleasant at all when it does happen because it's like your life is gone. It is literally on hold and you can't do anything. It creates huge anxiety, an inability to think about anything positive really for me. And the weirdest thing is that even if it's a really good thing that you really want to do, it doesn't make any difference to that anxiety and that waiting mode and that kind of dread and that almost thing, wish it didn't have to happen. I've experienced it, as I said, a lot with big things and small things. Big things like, round the world trips. It's been so severe in the past that I've actually had to book my flights a day or two before and spend a lot more money because I can't get them when they're cheap. I just can't go through that whole waiting thing. So there are a lot of reasons for this waiting mode, and one of them is a problem with routine interruption, and it takes away your security, your sense of safety when your routine's interrupted. You don't want things to be different, although if you've got AuDHD, the ADHD part of your brain can want things to be different, but the autistic side of the brain is going to fight that all the way. So you've got that. You've then got this whole thing with transition from one state to another. And when something happens in it hasn't, not a physical, when there's an event that's mentioned, even if it hasn't actually happened yet, as soon as it gets into your head, the state of acknowledging that this might happen is a transition. A transition doesn't actually have to be the physical event. It can be the thought about something. To transition to this state of being, everything's happy, safety, secure and peaceful on the horizon and I don't have to worry, this thing enters the head and then suddenly you're in fight or flight mode, you're on edge and it's all you can focus on. Another cause is obviously lifetime anxiety, and anxiety that's built up from years and years of burnout and being undiagnosed and dealing with all these struggles. Huge anxiety, let alone the anxiety related to the actual event itself. If it involves something like travel, there's a whole multitude of things to add to that. And then there's monotropism, which is only being able to focus on one thing. Like the brain will really home in on one thing and find it very difficult to let it go. So there's a lot of reasons that this happens. I have beaten myself up about it over the years. I've thought, well, no, I'm just freaking useless, I have no clue how to live life. I cannot do life because this is just not normal. I used to kid myself that it was normal, that everyone was the same as me. I really have no idea how I did that for so long, but I kind of did. And sometimes it's almost like I just want to stay in one room and live my whole life and not have to be interrupted, and not have to change anything and not have to have anything waiting, no appointments, no nothing. And other times it'll be like, yeah, I really want to do this or that or whatever, but I can't. The things fight each other. The ADHD and the autism fight each other all the time. But the waiting mode is a big example, and it is kind of pretty wrecking. It does destroy your life because however amount of time there is between you and the event is just completely taken over, and the anxieties build up and up and up. If you are anxious about what's going to happen, and you always will be anxious because you've got this interruption to routine, the pattern's changing, everything's changing. So that anxiety will get more and more and more so. Everything else just builds up and builds up and builds up. Ironically, if it's a kind of short-term thing, even long-term things, even like months of trying to prepare in your head, trying to rehearse it, being anxious, not being able to focus on anything else. Well, this has been your sole focus. I can still at the last minute be rushing around trying to do this, that and the other, not able to deal with the thing, because I think part of me wants to pretend it's not going to happen. And that is actually brings me on to the next bit, which is ways of kind of dealing with this waiting mode problem, because it just leads to, as I said, more severe anxiety. It leads to increased burnout symptoms, complete exhaustion, and then everything else in your life can't happen because you just can't focus on it. And a very, very low mood, which can kind of lead to depression, which can sap your energy. So any excitement you did have for the event is going to be gone as well. Now, I'm going to be honest, I really haven't come to terms with this. I've only been diagnosed for just over 2 years, and there's 5 decades of building up and creating all these behaviours and traits behind that. So I've got a lot to work out. But I have found a couple of things that do help a bit. Like last year, my daughter and I planned to do this trip to Canada and the UK, which is huge. I've gone back to the UK a lot because I'm from the UK. I currently live in New Zealand. How I got here is another thing that I believe was part of my autism, but that's another story. We planned this trip last September and we weren't going to leave until January. So the first time my daughter asked me about it, I'd said no. I just couldn't deal with it. It was too much for me to take. I'm going through burnout and it was just a huge thing. And then because my guilt and anxiety at having said no is yet another thing, I woke up the next day and I was like looking at the flights and things, and then I discovered that the cheapest flight was actually via Canada. That hadn't originally been part of the plan. It was just to go to the UK. I've always wanted to go to Canada, and when I discovered that we could go via Vancouver, I got all excited and impulsive, and I said to my daughter, okay, if we can go via Vancouver, I'll go. So they liked the idea of that, so we decided that's what we're going to do. Now, if it had been happening in the next week, it would have been hard, but it would probably been a lot easier, if that makes any sense. Because having like 3 months or 4 months to prepare for something with the brain that I have makes no difference to whether it's that long or 3 days. You know, it's going to take me the same amount of time to do it, and it's going to use up all of the time. So then I had to find ways of dealing with it. I got excited about it. I told a couple of people, but then I had to stop. I couldn't research anything because everything that connected with that trip started to trigger me. This is what happens. So I was trying to find distractions, and the biggest thing that helped was pretending it was never going to happen. I convinced myself I would not be going on that trip, and I held on to that conviction until pretty much about a week before. And then I started to panic and went into packing mode. And I think after that, adrenaline kicked in. But in the meantime, I had to convince myself it wasn't going to happen. So I had to avoid any triggers that could relate to that. But as I said, that was a big thing. And it did happen. And I did do it. And it was chaos at the end. And it was very difficult and way more challenging than I could possibly have imagined it would be. So... But again, that's another story. But if it's a small, like not such a far away thing, then there's other things that you can do, little things that are actually distraction. This is a time when you really want to get yourself distracted. And one thing I can do is just kind of switch into what I call bumble mode. And it's almost like my brain sort of switches off. I lose all track of time and everything, and I go into this kind of zone. The circumstances have to be right for it to happen, but when it does happen, you are in it, and then once you come out, it's almost like, kind of a shock to the system, like you've been asleep or something, and you can't remember anything or very little that happened while you're in that kind of zone. So I can do that. I can go and start bumbling around in the garden, get sort of into just picking up one thing and then just kind of go into it. I can't always do it, but sometimes I can. So that's one thing. Going for a walk is another thing, because I think that repeated movement is something that I really need my body to be doing, and it's a kind of soothing, self-soothing, calming kind of a thing. Another thing I do is always have like my journal and that open with a pen, always ready to write. I don't put things away. I'll have my book or Kindle open on the page I'm reading, so it's really easy to see that and think, oh yeah, I'll pick that up and then do that. And every bit of distraction I can get from this thing that's going to happen, this event, this future event, is a good thing. It helps me to get by. You can make lists. I am a compulsive list maker. This can kind of help, or it can hinder, it can make it worse, because with my list it's like the rehearsing, the going over and over everything, the social situation, the conversation, what you're going to say, scripting. And the more and more things I list, I don't just make one list, I'll make a whole book full of lists, like if I do a packing list, and then it'll be each little thing has a little compartment to it and things like that. But then every time I start to make the list, I'm triggered again and start worrying about it. So that in itself is kind of a bit self-destructive, but it can help to get things on paper. Sometimes you can be, right, okay, let's write down all of the things that can go wrong and tell myself, why am I worried? You can do that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me because there is no rational reason for it, really. It's just how my brain is. Those things can sort of help. You can do all kinds of different things as part from the list. You do little diagrams of like, okay, this week, instead of focusing on the event, you can just do a little diagram for this week and say, right, I might do this or that. That doesn't really work for me either. I'm not really good at planning stuff. But these little things can help. I think having a journal open, or a little thing like, maybe doing some washing up, cleaning a little area of the house, cleaning a tabletop or a worktop, something that gives you a little dopamine hit, but doesn't take a lot of energy, that you don't have to, it doesn't cost you too much in kind of energy and anxiety and all of the other things that we suffer with. Watching something, stuff like that, reading, mainly all the distraction things. But for me, as I said, the biggest thing, the thing that helped me the most, is either to avoid that long wait completely by doing things at the last minute, which is my go-to mode. Like, I remember when my kids were little and we needed to go to the supermarket, the thought of it would come as, things get low in the cupboard, and it would all start about a week before. And I knew that it's got to happen. And because I couldn't do the whole planning thing, and I never know what my energy is going to be like from one day to the next. And this is when the kids were, I didn't know then I was autistic. So I would have to say, right, I'm going now. We're going now. Get the kids ready quickly and go right on the spur of the moment. It was the only way that I could do it. Otherwise, it would just not happen. And that's how I've dealt with it pretty much my whole life, most things. As I said, flights at the very last minute. The only thing that I've really had to cope with long term, to be honest, is that last trip. Before that, all my trips are planned so that they happen within a week. But it's a thing. And then, I don't know if this makes you feel less lonely, if you've been going through this yourself, or if you understand what I'm going through. If you have, please comment. And as I go and find more ways of dealing with this, which I'm working on all the time, I'm trying to work on dealing with all my issues. And, I got to forgive myself because I'm very new to being autistic. Well, I'm not. I was born autistic, but I'm new to knowing about it. I'm still sometimes feeling like an imposter. If I do find other things that help me, I'll share them in future videos. But in the meantime, my name is Bobby. I was diagnosed with AuDHD just over 2 years ago. My channel's called Broccoli and Toast, and I talk about very late diagnosed AuDHD, the challenges and joys and day-to-day things, and the before and the after and all of that. If this helped you in any way, or if you can relate, maybe I'll see you again.